Hey Pokemon fans, it has been a long time since I've done a Pokemon related upload, so starting off with my apologies for that. With the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, I figured it was high time I sat down and documented everything I liked and disliked in these games. It's something I really enjoy doing, and it is possible to love a game while still having things to dislike in it. Now bear in mind that these are just my personal opinions, and things I like may be things you dislike and vice versa. I always welcome constructive discussion down in the comments section. Unlike my previous lists, this one will be slightly more casual. I won't be doing a separate video for the likes and dislikes like I did for Sun and Moon, nor will I be doing a stacked like to dislike list like I did for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Instead, I'm going to sit down and discuss the topics that come to mind, both the positives and negatives. I will still try to keep this to 5 points in total though. Now, this should go without saying, but spoilers ahead! Now let's hop into it. Sword and Shield did something for me that Sun and Moon never could. It gave me Pokemon that cracked my top 10 favorites of all time. I adore so many of the new Pokemon in this generation, and my old dad soul found particular love for Pokemon whose names were really just terrible puns. Sandaconda is a sand anaconda. Greedent is a greedy rodent. The names constantly had me smiling with how stupidly silly they were. This was also the generation that finally gave us some of the dual-type Pokemon we'd been asking for. Toxtricity gave us a really cool-looking electric poison type, and Frostmoth giving me ice coverage for my mono bug team was just awesome. It's also worth mentioning that there are some Pokemon I straight up disliked. Now, bear in mind this is totally personal opinion, and I expect quite a few trainers out there absolutely love some of these guys, but Grimmsnarl, Copperjaw, and Runerigus were three Pokemon that quickly made my I do not want list. I will only briefly touch on Gigamax forms here. I don't really like or dislike them. Some of the designs are really cool, some are just silly, and all of them are overpowered, and I don't really look forward to having them in competitive battling. Also, in Pokemon Sword and Shield, Snorlax does not simply block your path. Snorlax is your path. Alright guys, personal rant incoming. Now look, I knew going into Generation 8 that we had a limited Pokedex and that a lot of my favorite Pokemon were not going to be included. And was I mad about it? No, not really. I was a little disappointed, sure, but as a kid that grew up with Pokemon long before the days of having multiple consoles to trade myself with, or GTS and online play, not having every Pokemon available to me was nothing new. But then I saw the trailers. And what did I see in the trailers? Charizard. So surely, my mind reasoned, if Charizard is in the game, then Bulbasaur and Squirtle must be too, right? I mean, they wouldn't include one starter Pokemon from Generation 1 and not the other two. That would be crazy, like splitting up the Lake Trio, or only giving us Zekrom, but not Reshiram or Kyurem. The starter Pokemon are a trio, and they always have been. But no, Charizard was put into the game on release, and Squirtle and Bulbasaur were not. Now, we know from our good data mining friends out there that Bulbasaur and Squirtle exist in the game's code, so maybe by the time you're watching this, they are out and in the game. But them not being included upon release really rubbed me the wrong way. For the most part, other than that, I was pretty okay with the old mons that did get included into the games. A lot of them made sense for the weather, scenery, and places we have in the Galar region. So yes, this would technically make the list a top 6 instead of a top 5, but this was a point I didn't feel I could discuss without bringing up my thoughts on the other two. My biggest hope going into Generation 8 as far as the actual Pokemon themselves were concerned was that the limited decks would finally shake up the battling scene and bring more variety into teams. With some of the big boss mons from previous generations no longer part of the meta, it would make sense that some of the lesser used mons that were included in the games would finally get a place to shine. Instead, the meta seems to be staler than ever, and at the time of recording this, the games have been out less than a month. They moved the timer in competitive battling down to 20 minutes, but then brought back some of the stalliest mons out there. They gave us monsters like Galarian, Darmanitan, and Dracovish. On top of that, some of the cooler mons that, from the moment I saw them, I was really excited to use, turned out to have kind of lackluster move pools. Flapple is amazing, but his stats are kind of bad in comparison to others, and his move pool is extremely predictable. And that's just one example. I won't dive into all of them since that could probably be a video on its own. I am, however, still holding out hope. I have always loved using my favorite Pokemon and finding a way to make them work even in metas that didn't favor them. With some interesting typings and access to new moves given to us by TR, there is still a chance for interesting mons to make a place for themselves in this new battling scene. Look, I will be 100% honest when I say I went into Generation 8 with low expectations. Well, I wasn't as outwardly vocal with my negative feelings, although I also wasn't silent, towards Pokemon after Sun and Moon. I was right there with them with my skepticism for these new games. But this game blew my freaking mind. It is gorgeous. Every area of this game feels so incredibly alive and bustling with activity. You get the option to control your sound, the models look amazing, and I really enjoyed that this was a game that finally acknowledged that your character is a child. You are not 10 years old taking on evil teams. You are set out on your journey to become a champion, and that is what you do. You are not thrown into situations that you shouldn't be handling until the end of the game, when you have proven yourself a competent trainer and you've grown with your journey. I love that in this game, many of the gym leaders are just as invested in becoming the champion as you are. They fight you to become stronger themselves because at the end of the day, they're after the same goal as you. You being strong means that they have trainers to pass the torch of gym leader off to should they achieve their ultimate goal of becoming the champion. And for the majority of the game, it felt really well paced. It took longer than ever between gyms, but there was so much in between each gym that I didn't feel like at any point I was grinding it out to get to the next place. Each route felt unique and different, with tons of weather and scenery to explore. That being said, there are definitely some things in the story I didn't like. While the pacing of the early game felt amazing, the endgame, or climax, felt like it came out of nowhere. Well, I love the fact that they allowed you as a character to be left alone on your challenge. They left a glaring problem in that by not allowing us any of the information on what was actually happening. We knew there was something going on with Dynamax Pokemon, but that was really it. By the time the final boss mon came around, it felt like we went from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. We could have just had something that let us know what was going on behind the scenes. Something as simple as finding Leon's journal and letting us read what was happening would have made everything that was happening make much more sense. I felt myself thinking, why should I care about all this? Now, also worth mentioning on a personal note, Nintendo, why? Why did you have to make the good guy the bad guy for the 3rd generation in a row? The first time I saw Seneca Crane, the chairman, I thought surely this was a genuine good guy. I had such high hopes that Alina was gonna be the bad guy, and it would have been a super cool twist ending. Instead, like good guy Lysander and Lily's mom, for the 3rd generation in a row, our good guy leader was the bad guy. Now, one more thing that needs to be brought up about gameplay is the wild area, and Nintendo did an amazing job with the wild area of the game. It's an open world with total free control of the camera, which is a first for Pokemon games. Having the different weather means that it always feels interesting, even when biking through the same area for the 70th time. The large static encounter Pokemon are awesome to see, and raid battles with friends are super fun, profitable, and give you a fun way to get rare and good Pokemon with good stats. Now, of course, there are some negatives to the wild area, and the biggest one for me is the lag. I have an amazing internet connection, but the second I connect to the internet in order to raid battle with my friends, the wild area becomes a laggy mess. This is by far the topic that I have the most conflicting feelings over. Sword and Shield gave us an amazing cast of characters, many of whom I love, many of whom I dislike, and a few that I'm torn between loving and hating. Bede finally gave us a rival we could love to hate again, and for the longest time I just hated him, but the more the game went on, the more I realized I was looking forward to seeing him so that I could hate him all over again. He brought back some of the old feelings that Blue gave me playing through Generation 1. Marnie was finally the rival that was just your rival. She's not constantly butting into the story until the very end when literally everyone gets involved with the story. Having her brother be a famous rock star and gym leader meant that Team Yell being super behind her made sense. And she's also a normal girl with a famous family who just wants to make a name for herself the old-fashioned way. It's also worth pointing out that I love that she has an alternative style without being super edgy in personality the way that Nintendo usually casts these type of characters. The gym leaders were a hoot. Opal is probably my most hated and most loved leader of all time, and the interaction with Bede and his pinkness had me incoherently laughing and unable to play for probably a solid 5 minutes. But not all the characters in the game were the greatest. Going into Gen 8, I was really excited to see an older female professor. We haven't had a Pokemon game since Generation 5 where the only professor in the game was female, and we've never had an older woman put in charge of being the professor in any of the games. But she did nothing. I only remember seeing her twice throughout my entire journey. She doesn't give us our starter Pokemon, she isn't central to the story in any way. Instead, she works through her granddaughter, Sonia, which is fine, and it serves its purpose, but I really wanted to see more of her. By the end of the game, she just straight up retires, and because of my lack of any feelings towards her, I didn't care that she was leaving. Hop is by far the character I am the most conflicted on. He is the only rival we've ever had that shows real, genuine growth. His teams change from battle to battle as he learns from his defeats, and he has a clear goal in mind and a genuine heart. As a younger sibling myself, I really sympathize with having that older sibling who is just a rock star in your eyes and wanting to obtain the same level as them. He also serves to answer a really tough question. What do your rivals feel when you, their friend, obtain your dreams and goals, at the expense of it meaning they will not achieve theirs? However, Hop is just really annoying. I mean, have you heard? Hop has a brother, Leon, the champion. Champion Leon, his brother. Champion Leon is his brother, the champion, whose name is Leon. Hop was a record stuck on repeat for the entire game. I get it, Nintendo really wanted to hammer home the fact that Hop wanted nothing more than to surpass Leon and prove he was just as good as his brother. But they overdid it, and it came with the expense of me not wanting to talk to Hop anymore. During the playthrough, we literally had a game where I would see if we could get through an entire conversation with Hop without him mentioning the words champion, Leon, or brother. And it didn't happen. Hop had the potential to be the greatest rival Pokemon has ever seen, and instead they made him more annoying than How, which, good lord, I didn't think they could do. Okay, this is officially the worst top 5 list I've ever made because I can't think of what to put for number 5. Not because there's nothing I can think of, but because there's so much that could go here. The music in this game is the best we've ever had. Camping and cooking with the opportunity to see your entire team at the same time is a blast. The ease of level up items and items to make competitive breeding and training are easier than ever. There are 2 Pokemon nurseries, exclusive gym leaders. The majority of the Galar Formons are awesome. Little touches like the entire audience cheering and singing along during Gym Leader Dynamax and having Pokemon that are shy run from you in the wild, and good lord, a PC box that goes with you everywhere. On the other hand, render distance was a pain. Trying to trade with a specific person is just as bad as it was in Let's Go, and only one new shiny hunting method was introduced when there was a ton of potential for more. On top of that, a lot of the new shiny mons were kind of bland looking. Not all, but a fair few. The inability to mass release Pokemon and the AI they give you for max raid battles is actually worse than I was playing Pokemon at 7 years old. And let's be honest, those characters from the post-game were just a little weird. So many of these points are things I could have spent hours talking about, but instead of making a 2-hour-long top 5 list, I figured it was better just to quickly list them off. Overall, I love Pokemon Sword and Shield. These games brought back a love for Pokemon for me that had been fading since Sun and Moon were released. The return to tradition, while also giving us new features and plays on those traditions, were a breath of fresh air that we so desperately needed. For the first time in years, I find myself playing Pokemon outside of content creation, and I've been having so much fun playing these games that every other game in my library has been pushed aside in favor of another raid battle with friends or breeding a new competitive mon. Pokemon Sword and Shield were the games we were waiting for. They are what we hoped Let's Go would be, and they're truly worthy of being the first new generation on the Nintendo Switch. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below on what you loved or disliked in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my points, and hey, now that I'm officially back to making videos, let me know some videos you'd like to see me make. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.